Ukraine has intensified its attacks on Russian oil refineries, and the new attacks are already causing significant economic impact. According to experts, nearly 40% of Russian refinery capacity is currently idle, primarily due to Ukrainian drone attacks, which account for up to 70% of the shutdowns. Scheduled maintenance at some plants had to be postponed to at least partially maintain production. Washington Post reports. The consequences are also being felt by ordinary consumers. The fuel shortage in Russia is reaching approximately 20% of monthly gasoline demand. That's about 400,000 tons of the 2 million normally consumed. About 1 in 50 gas stations has already stopped selling gasoline, and national production has fallen by approximately 10%. Russia, an economic powerhouse and energy resource, accustomed to exporting oil, is now forced to import petroleum products, primarily gasoline. Since July, the country has increased fuel purchases from Belarus by 36% compared to last year, and in September, imports rose by almost 170% compared to the previous month. However, these volumes are still insufficient to meet domestic demand. Russian Energy Minister Alexander Novak proposed expanding gasoline imports, including from China, South Korea, and Singapore, and eliminating the corresponding duties. Furthermore, Russian authorities are considering the use of various chemical additives, including ethanol, monomethylaniline, a substance banned 10 years ago. To ease the burden on the domestic market, the government extended the ban on gasoline and diesel exports until the end of the year. Supply disruptions are being felt most acutely in Crimea and several other regions of the country. As a reminder, regular Ukrainian drone strikes on oil and gas facilities in Russia are depriving it of its main source of funding for the war. Forbes wrote that this could destabilize Russian society as much as it did on the eve of the February Revolution of 1917. The publication notes that Ukraine attempted to target this vulnerable spot of the aggressor as early as late 2023. But then the Biden administration, fearing rising global oil prices, effectively vetoed Kiev's strategy. In the summer of 2025, Ukraine launched a new campaign of strikes against Russian refineries and pipelines. This time, with Washington no longer objecting to such strikes, the campaign produced significant results. According to various estimates, Russia lost between 17% and 20% of its oil refining capacity. This has caused significant fuel shortages and rising prices on Russia's domestic market, increasing social pressure on the Kremlin as ordinary Russians increasingly feel the effects of the war. Ukrainian drone strikes on oil refineries achieve what sanctions alone couldn't. Moscow has found ways to adapt to Western sanctions, but it still lacks reliable defense against Ukrainian drones, explained former Ukrainian Defense Ministry advisor Serhiy Kuzan. The authors of the article noted that Russian propaganda cannot ignore the queues at gas stations in many regions of Russia, but instead tries to explain this away as the consequences of increased seasonal demand for fuel and unscheduled refinery maintenance. Only occasionally does it acknowledge that these unscheduled maintenance are caused by destructive drone debris flying freely over European Russia. And all this is happening against the backdrop of a gradual deterioration in the overall economic situation in Russia. While these attacks on refineries alone won't end the war, they are shaping its trajectory. Putin often positions himself as the heir to the Tsars, restoring the empire. But he should recall Tsar Nicholas II during World War I, when overextended fronts and domestic shortages made domestic unrest as dangerous as an enemy abroad. The article's authors noted. The United States will provide Ukraine with intelligence to launch long-range missile strikes against Russia and will also allow Kyiv to attack energy infrastructure deep within the Kremlin's borders. Furthermore, the possibility of sending weapons to Ukraine that would allow it to strike more Russian targets is being considered. The US is also asking NATO allies to provide similar support. The Telegraph reports Ukraine reportedly benefited from US intelligence throughout the war, but Kiev has requested additional assistance for strikes on Russian oil refineries, pipelines, and power plants to deprive the Kremlin of vital revenue and oil. US President Donald Trump, in turn, is calling on European countries to stop purchasing Russian oil in exchange for his agreement to impose tough sanctions against Moscow. According to US officials, the approval for the intelligence transfer came shortly before Trump suggested that Ukraine could reclaim all Russian-occupied lands. This marked a sharp rhetorical shift in Kyiv's favor. After seeing the economic problems that the war is causing in Russia, I believe that Ukraine, with the support of the European Union, is in a position where it can fight and win and return all of Ukraine to its original borders, the American president wrote, then shortly after meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenski. The US is also considering Ukraine's request for additional military assistance, including Tomahawk missiles with a range of 2,500 kilometers, which are capable of hitting Moscow and much of western Russia. For the first time, the United States will assist Ukrainian long-range missile strikes against energy targets deep within Russian territory, according to media reports. Energy revenues remain the Kremlin's main source of funding for military operations. Media previously reported that a resolution calling for the monthly transfer of $10 billion in Russian assets to Ukraine has been introduced in the U.S. Senate. The new resolution was sponsored by Republican Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana. Media also reported on whether Trump had decided to sell Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. According to U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, Russia needs to wake up and accept reality. The United States is considering granting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's request for Tomahawk cruise missiles and permission for Kyiv to launch them deep into Russia. President Donald Trump's special representative for Ukraine and Russia, Keith Kellogg, confirmed over the weekend, according to the Washington Post. The publication notes that Tomahawk cruise missiles, which have a range of at least 2,414 kilometers, would be a significant boost to Ukraine's arsenal and its ability to strike deep into Russian territory, including Moscow, something the previous U.S. administration was unwilling to allow. The publication reports that Trump's special representative, Keith Kellogg, said in an interview with Fox News that Trump had authorized Ukraine to carry out long-range strikes using American-made weapons. At the same time, U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance, who also gave an interview to the same channel, shared that Trump has not yet made a final decision regarding the sale of Tomahawk missiles to European countries, which then plan to send them to Ukraine. The publication notes that Vance expressed the opinion that Russia should wake up and accept reality. A lot of people are dying and they have nothing to show for it. How many more people are they willing to lose? How many more people are they willing to kill for very little, if any, military advantage? Vance said.